Hello and welcome to SquatchBot.com. I'm Darrin Smith, and you may be wondering what is up with the Halloween costume. Well, there's a lot of statistical evidence that supports that the individuals who are going missing within the national forests are generally wearing bright colors, and the color of choice seems to be red. So if the Sasquatch is involved with the abduction of these individuals, I decided that I would wear a red shirt today with the hopes of at least enticing a Sasquatch to come in and investigate. So that is why I'm wearing the red shirt. And for those of you who used to watch the original series and you are a bit concerned that I beamed down to a planet and you know the general demise for those individuals who are wearing a red shirt, I am definitely next generation, so there's nothing to worry about there. So I have beamed down to that location. We've been investigating the last couple of episodes. I think there is something unusual going on in this area, and I absolutely see the reasons why the Sasquatch would be interested in coming down into this area. I think with the fires that were in the area, the Sasquatch are maybe taking a different route down from those higher elevations down to those lower elevations. And having done that reconnaissance using Google Earth, I definitely see why this particular area would be very strategic for them. So I do want to continue my investigation of this area. And also, you saw in the last episode, I did encounter some emotional anxiety, and this is not a state that I generally get when I'm out in the forest. And there was an individual, one of our viewers, who suggested that the reason I was getting that uneasy feeling was that I was being watched. And that really did entice me to come back to this location, because I do see why the Sasquatch would be interested in moving through this environment. It is absolutely Sasquatch habitat here. And I do think, considering this time of year, as the Sasquatch are doing their seasonal migration from those higher elevations down to those lower elevations, with the various fires that were in the area and the various burned out zones, this corridor does create a strategic advantage for the Sasquatch. So I definitely wanted to come back out here and continue our investigation of this area. And I'm still really putting in a lot of effort trying to get up to that nest site that I discovered last spring, because I do think the Sasquatch are hunkered down up in that area if they haven't already begun their movement down the ridgeline. And unfortunately, there's just too much snow on the road up there, and I don't think we'll be able to get up there until spring, but I'm going to continue my efforts to get up there. So we've returned to this location. We're going to continue our investigation of this area, and I'm hoping tonight to be doing some night surveillance in the area. Those of you who have done any sort of research into the Sasquatch phenomenon, you absolutely know that there is just a broad spectrum as to the theories regarding what these creatures are. I don't know what these animals are. I generally think that they are of flesh and blood. However, there are a lot of very credible researchers out there who think otherwise. So I definitely try to keep an open mind when I'm conducting my research. And I think it's very important as researchers that we take this approach and we present the evidence that we've gathered regardless of how outlandish it may be. And I think by doing so, we are going to start coming up with some answers. And one device I bring out into the field, it's one of those devices the paranormal groups take out to detect electromagnetic fields. And I use it from time to time, especially in any sort of areas where I've experienced any sort of emotional resonance, and this was one of those locations because when I was here the last time, I was very anxious. There was the forest was dead silent, and there was an emotional response that I was having, and it's not something that I get frequently when out in the woods. So I did bring the detector with me, and I'm just going to kind of look around to see if I can get the needle to give me any sort of unusual readings. Now, I have used this on expeditions, and I was up in Oregon conducting some Sasquatch research up there. I was in a very remote location, and I did get some very unusual readings using this device. And that location was also where I saw that unusual ball of light float past my tent. It was in the middle of the night, a orb of bluish light floated past my tent, and I have no understanding what that ball of light was. I don't think it was ball lightning because it was moving so slowly. So I have definitely experienced a lot of very unusual happenings while conducting Sasquatch research, and I really think it's important that as researchers into this phenomenon, we put aside our personal biases regarding what these creatures are, and we just try to gather the evidence and present that evidence. And I think by doing so, we're going to start coming up with some answers. As I mentioned earlier, I have no clue what the Sasquatch are, and I'm on a personal quest to find some answers. However, I thought it could be constructive to open an ongoing dialogue with you guys regarding some of the topics surrounding this mystery. On this episode, I wanted to discuss the topic, what are the Sasquatch? And specifically, the possibility that these creatures are an undiscovered primate or relic hominid. What do you guys think? Do you believe the Sasquatch are an undiscovered primate or relic hominid? Please let me know in the comment section below. I do find this theory solid, in the sense that it would explain the varying types of Sasquatch around the world, such as the Yeti in Nepal or the Yowie in Australia, which would be the result of environmental evolution. However, for a species to survive, it would need a considerable breeding population, and I find it surprising these creatures in numbers can remain undiscovered. There are literally hundreds of educated researchers scouring the woods in search of these creatures, and there are countless trail cameras keeping surveillance in our wildlands. So how is it possible that these creatures can remain hidden? Primates are generally very curious animals, and taking into consideration their sizable habitat and considerable distances these creatures seem to travel, especially during their seasonal migrations, I do find it surprising there are not more encounters. Though I do have a number of theories, I am curious to what you guys think. Are the Sasquatch an undiscovered primate or relic hominid? How is it possible they are able to remain undiscovered? And why would they take such pains to remain hidden? Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and I will be continuing these discussions on future episodes. As the sun descended, and as I moved into the area where I heard the possible whoop and where I discovered those interesting impressions in the snow, I decided it was time to alter my attire and prepare for night surveillance. So I did bring some interesting gear out this trek. One is this driveway monitor, and what this is you set these transmitters out and about, and if anything passes in front of it, it will trigger the alarm on the receiver. What's nice about these devices is they're all on the same frequency, so you can create a perimeter using these transmitters, and they will all alert the receiver if something has moved in front of it. I've had this for a very, very long time. I don't even think this particular brand is on the market anymore, but I've had some really good results with this old technology. So I may be deploying some of these tonight for our night surveillance, and it will at least alert me if something had moved in front of the various sensors that I have deployed. And I think I will set one up on this outcropping, so if anything comes out on this outcropping to get that expansive view of the surrounding area, it will trigger the alarm and it will alert me to get this rock outcropping on immediate surveillance. Now, another thing some researchers like to do is to create gifting stations for the Sasquatch, where they would put a number of items in a very prominent location where they believe the Sasquatch are venturing. And the one thing about the gifting stations that I think you should be cautioned about is a lot of the items that one might put on one of these stations could absolutely go missing as a result of birds. I have done an experiment on a gifting station where I had put some items out, and I discovered that the large blackbirds and ravens could swoop down and eliminate just about everything on the gifting station. They would take anything shiny, they would take all the little items that were on the tree stump or the rock. They could also grab the apples and literally fly away with the apples. So some researchers were thinking that that was evidence that the Sasquatch were taking them because there wasn't any debris from an animal that was eating the apple there at the location. So it looked like something had picked it up and carried it away. And it was the case. However, they were birds that were doing so. So one thing you may consider doing, and I've seen other researchers do this, I think it's a brilliant idea, is to put something there that may be interesting for a Sasquatch, but absolutely not interesting for a bird. And one thing I love are these little wooden discs that have Sasquatch art on it. You've got a full body shot here, and you've got a head shot. So if you place these among like your potatoes, apples, whatever you would put on your gifting station, some people put marbles and other little items. If you put something random like these Sasquatch discs here, then when the Sasquatch approaches the items there, if it does turn out to be a Sasquatch that does come to your gifting station, they're going to see this art. And by seeing this art, I think they are so intelligent, they are going to recognize that you've identified them, meaning you know what they look like, you know what their appearance is. And I think by doing that, by making that connection with the Sasquatch, I think they're going to be more open to revealing themselves to you. So I told you, when I go into an environment, I try to dress the same way all the time. I usually have my hat on, and I usually wear pretty much the same sort of attire when I head into an environment. I just keep going into that same environment. So if there are Sasquatch in the area, they become familiar with my appearance. And by placing something like this in the environment for them to encounter, I think they will be intelligent enough to make the connection that we've identified them. And I think that's going to open the door for some very interesting encounters. I found this Bigfoot art on Etsy.com. They are drink coasters made out of cork from the Friends of Bigfoot shop. I affixed the coasters onto very large river stones to keep them weighted down to hopefully prevent birds from taking them. I really like this rock outcropping, as I mentioned before, because it has this incredible expansive view of the area. And if a sentry wanted to position themselves in an area where they could have that expansive view, this would definitely be the location. However, I don't think it's going to be likely that we're going to catch a Sasquatch coming up on this outcropping tonight, because generally I think these Sasquatch are moving around in the thick forested environments during the evening hours, and I think the sentries only position themselves in areas with that expansive view when they're protecting a family unit. And as I mentioned on the last episode, these various locations up on this ridge would be the perfect place for the sentries to position themselves, because the burnt out areas here, there is a burnt out forest up against a healthy forest, so the sentries can get up here and they have this really incredible expansive view. And once they're getting ready to go forage or move about, I think that's when the Sasquatch would leave these kind of lookout areas and regroup with the family units that would be down in that thick, heavily forested areas. So I'm not so sure we're going to encounter Sasquatch up in this open out area and on this rock outcropping, but I am going to stay in the area for a while to conduct some surveillance, because I'll really be able to see an extreme distance. And I'm not going to stay on this rock outcropping. I'm going to go up into another one where I can monitor this area, but I would be relatively concealed. Not like it's likely you're going to conceal yourself from a Sasquatch. They're just so in tune to their environment. It's not going to happen. I think on rare occasions you might surprise them, but I think it's very rare indeed. I think Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin surprised Patty when they came up on Bluff Creek, but I definitely think it's a rare occasion. So that's my plan. I'm going to get out and do a little looking around before I pack up and relocate, and I'm going to turn off the camera here because I've got a lot to cover before it starts getting dark, and then we will relocate to a location where we can still see the rock outcropping and a lot of this expansive area, but will be relatively secluded. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a nice rock outcropping up on that embankment up there, and there's a lot of thick vegetation around it, and I think that would be a perfect place to kind of situate myself to monitor this expansive area, and also that rock outcropping in that whole area back in that direction. So I think I'm going to head up and investigate that area up there. But this is actually a really good time to kind of situate yourself and just observe the environment, because from my experience, the Sasquatch start to move around quite a bit just at about sunset, and I think what is happening there is the sentries are reconnecting, they're regrouping with the family units, and then they will prepare for their evening foraging. So I do think that this is a really good time to be observing the wildlife in the area. Okay, so I have gotten another layer on here. I don't know if you could see my camp chair back there. But I got my camp chair, I got the floor out, and I've got the parabolic here. So I'll really be able to keep this area under surveillance. I could see the rock outcropping from here, so I really have a good vantage point to see if there's anything coming through this area. But now this is definitely my least favorite thing to do when it comes to Sasquatch research, is to be on solo night surveillance. I don't have any problem camping or moving about when I'm doing things alone in the woods, but I really don't like staying stationary in one position and just sitting there kind of waiting to be abducted. So yeah, I don't like this sort of maneuver, but I do think it is one of the best opportunities we can have to capture a Sasquatch on camera, is to just hunker down in an environment where we anticipate them to be moving through and to just sit there and wait. So that is what I'm going to do. I am probably not going to make much more dialogue at this point. I am just going to get in position and just hunker down with my gear and just keep this area under surveillance. And I'll probably be here for a few hours. I'm quite a distance from my car, so we'll kind of see how it goes. It's going to take quite a trek to get back to my car, but at least I'll be out and moving at that point. So I guess I will get at it. I've been at it for hours now, and I haven't detected any animal activity. I did hear an unusual clicking noise on the parabolic microphone. It was odd. It almost sounded like when I click through the FLIR to shuttle through the various settings, just a clicking noise. I thought it was very unusual. There might have been something involving my electronics that was making that sound, but I couldn't track it down. So it is getting incredibly cold, and I am at a point now where I am ready to call it a night. So I am going to start making the trek out of here. It was a long trek through the dark woods to get back to my car, and although I didn't have anything unusual happen along the way, There were a few curiosities I experienced during this outing, which I will mention. However, I'd like to be clear, I'm not concluding any of the following was Sasquatch related. I'm only trying to be thorough in my investigation, and I'm only noting them here as curious happenings. Earlier in the day, when I was in that environment bowl area, where I had that emotional uneasiness during my first visit to this area, and where I heard that unusual sound I concluded was a woodpecker, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye a number of times, and as I turned to look in the direction of the movement, I saw for a split second what I can only describe as an area that was slightly out of focus or blurry. This shimmering blur was moving, however almost instantaneously disappeared. The first time this anomaly happened, I dismissed the occurrence as a trick of light. However, it happened more than once, and in different lighting situations, which I do find curious, and I only experienced it in this particular area. The second curious thing noted was the unusual clicking sound I was picking up on the parabolic microphone. It was an odd mechanical sound to be hearing deep in the woods, and at present I have no explanation for the sound. And lastly, I discovered an orange cloth bag near my vehicle, which I did not notice earlier in the day. It was in a very conspicuous location, and it is very unlikely I would not have noticed it as I pulled into the area. Again, I am not saying that any of these odd occurrences are Sasquatch related. I am only mentioning them as unusual happenings, and as I mentioned earlier, I feel it is important as researchers we share our discoveries and experiences, regardless of how outlandish they may be. And I think by doing so, we are going to start coming up with some answers to this incredible mystery. I'm Darrin Smith, and I'll see you here next time at squatchbot.com. Transporter room, 1 to beam up.